assuming I get it back from the print shop by that time. Now, the pass. The next pass is going to be a map. We want to lay out a map of the world on a sheet of paper. And you're expected to fill out 10 different places. I have 9 of them here. I've forgotten what the 10th one was, but I'll remember it eventually. Anyway, I want you to just be able to look at the map. Now, folks, this should be really simple for college students. And tell me where North America is. Tell me where South America is. And tell me, where Greece is. I mean, on a world map, just if you come really close, where Rome is, where Italy is, Israel, Africa, South America, India and China, the places we've talked about. There is a 10th one, but I can't think of the name of it right now. The basic stuff. In other words, when I say India, you should picture the little peninsula in your mind in the southern part of Asia. China, again, China, Far East. Identify those. All right. And that will probably be given on October 6th also. Just be able to write these place names on a blank map. All right, any questions? Again, every college student should be able to do this relatively easy job. All right. We left off last time with the Gracchus brothers. And that they both were martyrs for their cause. And I want to admire their courage, especially the younger one, knowing what had happened. His older brother, the younger one, took up the same cause. What this led to is further violence. Now, folk, I'll tell you now, I was going to save it till later, I'll tell you now. My very first term paper ever, it was a high school paper. We were only required to write one paper in high school, and it served both for our history paper and our English paper. And my topic was, is American society following in the footsteps of the Roman Empire? What happened to the Roman Empire? Well, the Roman Empire had 2 falls. The first fall was the fall of the Roman Republic. That's what we talk about. That's what we're talking about right now. The second fall was the fall of the whole empire. The Republic fell first, in other words, the democracy fell. The murder of the Gracchus brothers opened a door for a whole lot of rioting and bloodshed. Now, when I wrote the paper, we were having riots in the streets of our big cities. It was the 1960s, and there were riots in the streets of southern cities, particularly Selma, Alabama, and yes, Atlanta, Georgia. Race riots, anti-Vietnam War riots, and they got worse and worse. And today, right now, our country is having riots again. The riots led to a weakening of the Republic and ultimately led to its downfall. Now, into this scenario came a new general named Marius. Now, "35 years ago, I joined the United States Army myself. When I joined, I put my left hand on the Bible and raised my right hand toward heaven and swore to defend our country." All right. What Marius did, he had his soldiers who he recruited swear not to the Roman Republic, not to Rome, but swear an oath of loyalty to himself. In other words, it would be like me deciding to join the army and swearing an oath of loyalty to one of America's generals at that time. General Omar Bradley was still alive. He had a couple of years to live. Anyway, basically he recruited troops who were loyal to him personally and fully on being loyal to the Roman Republic. A huge disaster. Now what this amounted to eventually was every other Roman general who came after him would swear troops in who were loyal to himself. This was to lead to Julius Caesar getting a bunch of troops who were loyal only to him. It would be like if Ted Turner decided he'd have an army, and some other rich tycoon would decide he'd have an army, and some other tycoon would decide he'd have an army, and every rich person in the country would have an army. Basically, that's what it amounted to. Each individual had their own private armies, and inevitably, these armies were going to start fighting each other. All this led to the weakening of the Roman Republic. Well, formerly they had sworn an oath of loyalty to the Senate, but instead they swore an oath of loyalty to the general who recruited them. Placed a lot of power in the hands of individual generals. Now, military coups, folk, is not a thing of the past. In my lifetime, we'd wake up every morning to a new military coup that had taken over some Latin American country. A military coup took over Argentina 2 or 3 times in the last 50 years, took over Brazil once, took over Honduras. In fact, hardly any Latin American country escaped being taken over military coup. Libya, a strong man took over Libya once. I mean, we have case after case of it occurring in the 20th century. Well, eventually, 3 people came to hold all the power. They were Julius, Pompey, Crassus. Crassus was the richest man in Rome. He got together a really large army. I call him Crassus, your book pronounces it Crassus. Pompey led an army against the slave rebellion. And he also led an expedition that helped to conquer Spain. Now, the date we're talking about, we're about in the year 71 BCE. In other words, some 70 years before the birth of Christ. Pompey was in Spain. Now, Julius. Now, of these 3 men, maybe you know it already. The one who actually wound up triumphing was Julius Caesar. Julius was sent here to what they called Gaul. Now, today it's called France. At the time it was called Gaul, and he conquered Gaul. And he sent a famous message back from Gaul, back to Rome, that consists of 3 Latin words, and folk I know I can't pronounce, so it's something like Guido Guidovici. Now, if any of you can pronounce it better, go ahead. Basically, it means the 3 words are, I came, I saw, I conquered. Again, I've had students who, I never took Latin, but essentially, he's famous for several sayings. One of them being this one, I came, I saw, I conquered. So he was in Gaul. Now, in 71 BC, there was a big slave uprising. And I believe this was in one of Spartacus, but I'm not sure. But one of the most famous slave uprisings in all of history was where Spartacus rose up and killed a bunch of their, these slaves killed a bunch of their masters and created a rebellion. The problem the slave uprisings had was the slaves, once they had broken from their masters and got together, they could never organize. Spartacus was the leader, but he found his people, his followers, would not really follow him. Make long story short, several thousand of them were crucified, including Spartacus himself. But Pompey was one of the main ones who put down rebellion. Now, Crassus was sent over here to fight in Syria to conquer what was left of the Seleucid Empire. He conquered it, but in the process he was killed in battle. So that left only two of the three men, Caesar and Pompey. Caesar, I'll call him Caesar, his name is Julius Caesar. Caesar began to find himself at odds with the Senate, and finally the Senate sent an order to him: lay down your arms, dismiss all your army, come home and retire. Caesar knew if he came home he would probably be killed, so he marched instead his army toward Rome to either take Rome or lose it. As his men crossed a big river here in northern Italy, he told his men, now, all right, you all crossed the river, now turn around and burn the bridge. Actually, I believe he burned all his bridges. That means that from that incident came the saying, I'm burning my bridges. In other words, I'm not going back. Burning my bridges means we're going to either conquer Rome or we're going to die trying, but there's no place to run to. So he burned the bridges. He went on to the city of Rome, engaged the Roman army that was led by Pompey. He defeated Pompey, and as a result, the Republic ended.